All right, welcome to Modern Papist. Today we have John from Project 101 with us. We're going to be talking about dealing with bad priests and terrible pastoral care. Now, that doesn't mean we're not also going to be talking about good pastoral care and basically what pastoral care has kind of been used recently as some sort of code word for not good things, but we're going to be talking about our experiences that have really impacted us and those that we know.
Yep, that's what we're doing today. So I'll wait for your reading. You do
I
so.
didn't know if sorry, I didn't know if you wanted to go ahead or if you want to go
No,
with your example or if you maybe.
I can start off here on my end if you want me to. Sure. So I'm gonna start off with kind of a trend that I see. It's not in a specific priest at all. But one of the big problems that I run into with priests, generally speaking, and this is of course not all priests, and there are some great priests out there, is for lack of a better term, kind of being like a fop, lacking masculine qualities. I think that that's a real turnoff for a lot of people. I think priests sometimes, in an effort to be gentle, almost come across as not challenging. I know there's definitely been some confessors that I've had that have, basically said, "Oh, come to Jesus. He loves you. One our Father. Go on your way." And never actually confront me about any of the issues that I have. And I think generally speaking, there might be a gender or a sex divide on this, but as a man, it's okay for priests to challenge you. And I find that a lot of priests are terrified of challenging you. And so their homilies come off as bland, their confessions come off as trite, and you don't really feel like you've interacted with God or with one of God's servants. You feel like you've interacted with a marshmallow that's gonna give you happy feelings.
I mean, I would assume most people who have noticed would probably agree with that. And the reason why I put it that way is because not a lot of people have noticed that, where their priest just isn't challenging to them, isn't calling them to be Christ-like or more Christ-like, which is essentially, I mean, that's their job. Is to help us become sanctified and make sure that we don't sin anymore. So, and that's, am I on the right track of that? Like, understanding.
Absolutely.
And because like I've definitely had priests where they've given me very softball confession states, and not every confession is going to be amazing. I don't think that's what you're saying. That's not what I'm saying. But it's this idea of, especially if you have a regular confessor, that they address some things that they may notice that shouldn't be there, or it's kind of hard to say this because I know that like they can't break the seal, but it's uh, challenging you when you should be challenged on something and not just, all right, well, I'm asking for forgiveness, because it's not the degree of it's not challenging your ability to regret your sin and confess it. It's the fact of, are you doing anything about it, right?
Right, and I think one of the big things too, that was, stated that I think sums this up is that, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. So if you're falling into sin, ultimately, uh, how much of it is your fault and how much of it isn't, and so on and so forth, and circumstances. But, at the end of the day, it's you choosing to do something that God has provided grace enough for you not to do, or you failing to do something that God has provided you grace enough to not fail to do. And so for priests, not being afraid to say, well, you know what? You've gotten angry at your wife, or you've lost your temper, or you've done dot 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 the last five times you've been to confession. What are actual steps that you're taking to avoid these things? And I feel like in some ways priests are more comfortable, at least what I've found, with sexual sins, saying, okay, remove yourself from those. But with sins like repeated anger or sloth or, whatever have you, it's just kind of like, okay, we'll go pray for God's forgiveness. And there's not really a challenge there. And I don't know if it's a fear of priests that maybe, they don't have people coming to confession, so they don't want to scare them off. I'm not sure what it is that makes them kind of afraid to take practical steps as need be.
I mean, do you have anything more to say on that, or can I go on to the next?
No, I mean, I guess the only other thing would be like homilies, not challenging you in homilies. There are all of these dead homilies that are just like pie in the sky heaven and Jesus loves you. And there's a way to challenge people without scaring them off. And I don't think that many priests have mastered that. But like the rambling homilies, I remember there was one homily that I listened to about how cute babies are and about how Jesus became a baby and babies are bring everybody together and give you warm fuzzies just like God does. And it was like, oh my gosh, and you're sitting in the back of the church like, if I got to heaven, a little bit faster, it wouldn't bother me right now.
Well, so that's very interesting because my pastor recently did a very good homily that was exactly what you were talking about, where it was challenging and it had to do with contraception. And he brought up NFP, and he did it in such a way where it was challenging, but it wasn't, how do you say, demeaning. And it was it like called on your dignity, but it wasn't, it was very uplifting. I don't know how else to say that. It was just like, without like doing his speech itself, or his homily itself, it was a very good homily, and it did exactly what you're doing. And now, like, that's one of the reasons why, and this goes back to the video I just recently did, why it took me 9 months to find a priest in a parish like that, because I don't have to deal with homilies that are just ramblings. And confessions are really good. They are challenging. I do get, well, I do get questioned on some of the sins, because that helps me address them from a virtue standpoint, not just from a grace standpoint.